Hello, everybody. Happy Friday. Welcome to Aquarius Rising Africa. And of course, we have with us Mr. Leo Zagami, who is now an American citizen. So very happy to have you back, Leo. How are you? How was your week or your month, rather, because we have you on monthly. So how are you doing?
Very well. I'm just finishing up the last touches on my new book that, as you know, I want to present on your show possibly next month. And due to the importance of this new book and the topics that I'm touching, I'm being very thorough and trying to be, very attentive to not offend anyone, because my next book is also about the fastest expanding religion in the world, which is Islam. But at the same time, there has to be some honesty. And of course, this will or might create some problems when you are too honest. So let's see what happens. But in the meantime, today, I'm glad to be on your show. We decided to discuss another topic of great importance, which is civil war in reality as well as in Hollywood with this new movie. So I'm very glad to be here.
Exactly. Well, I'm happy to have you as well. And well, I wouldn't expect anything other than direct honesty from you. That's how I've come to know you, which is awesome.
Yes.
So, yeah.
You see,
but
when you have the West today in a weaker spot than it used to, because, we just discussed it prior to going on air, how we used to be really the colonizers once upon a time, because now the new colonizers are the ones with the Chinese.
Yes, absolutely. Wow. Absolutely.
They are the ones who are kind of colonizing. We had just in the last 24 hours a very important meeting that happened between Blinken and his counterpart, which once again demonstrates on one side the weakness and also the fact that China is continuing to invite the West to just bow down to his expectation of a new Sino-Russian world order, because that's in the end what's happening here. China is continuing to finance in a way Russia and this war, because without China I don't think that Russia would have been able to continue and to be successful in their endeavors. When you go to a Russian supermarket today, you are simply witnessing whatever you will witness here in America, in Europe, in any other Western country. So there is not been that economic crisis that was envisioned, while instead the West is becoming weaker and weaker because we are giving all our money. We just saw last week an act of betrayal, we can say, from part of the Republican Party. So when you're talking about an act of betrayal by the party who has long claimed to be against this war, suddenly Mike Johnson, the Speaker of the House, that looks like Clark Kent, about to fly in the air, zoom off. Well, it is a betrayal that a lot of Americans feel will inevitably bring us closer and closer to the possibility of a civil war. Now, that's why today we have chose this subject. This subject, of course, when you talk about civil war today, inevitably we go to this movie, and those who have at least seen the trailer of this movie, I don't say the whole movie, they have seen at one point of the trailer one of the main protagonists, who happens to be also, I think, the husband of the main protagonist, who says, "What kind of American are you?" And that is really what we are discussing today. What kind of American are you? An American that is confused, because maybe it's been brainwashed in the campuses or universities that are becoming a political playground rather than a place where you should go for education and knowledge. And this is happening really the last few months since the beginning of the hostilities in Gaza, the war in Gaza, however you want to call it, and it's brought this growing anti-Semitism. Now, I know that a lot of people tend to say, "Oh, but Israel this, Israel that." Guys, most of the Americans, Jewish people who are living here, they are American. They are not Israeli, And so to currently find themselves attacked and ostracized in their own country, in a country that has never been known to not guarantee the freedom of expression, of liberty, of religion, the freedom of being able to debate these things freely without being attacked. Suddenly, you are invited to leave the campus because maybe you side with Israel, or you are a Jewish person. A professor was taken away his pass. People were injured. There is now a trend that is expanding from Columbia University into all the other universities in the United States, which is not a good trend, because we have seen in the past this kind of trend. We have always seen inevitably some consequences later on. And so civil war, it also means understanding what is happening to our younger people who are the future of this country, who are basically fed all this hate on a daily basis. And a lot of people, Chantelle, they say, but how is it possible that, these organizations that protest, that create chaos in the name of Palestine, are actually financed by a guy who is Jewish, because George Soros or Alex Soros, the son, are of Jewish origin. And so it creates also a problem of understanding what is at work here. But when you understand the history that really has generated and created Israel, and at the same time the history of Jewish people having the worst enemy within the Jewish people. The worst enemy is the heretics, the Sabbatean Frankists, the ones who have given birth to the labor Zionism, who have given birth to communism, because there will not have been communism as we know it without the Jesuits first, who experimented in the reductionism in South America, but later on, of course, Karl Marx, Moses S. These people are the people who have, and then of course the revolutionary, the Bolsheviks, a large part of it was Jewish. So the understanding is very difficult when you are external, and you tend to blame a whole race, and that is completely wrong. And that's really why we need to understand here is not about the race, it's about ideology, it's about people who have the intention of maybe destroying the Jewish religion rather than helping it out. So Soros, in that case, finances pro-Palestine organizations, as well as all these protest, woke actions of all sorts around this ideology, the woke ideology, just to give a generalized term to what these libtards are doing. And of course, is not in line with the traditional Judaism. It's not in line with Christianity. It's not in line with. I mean, even the values that these people are fighting for. What values are they fighting for? Because here there is a lot of confusion at this point, even amongst our young people. They need to understand you are supporting something, but at the same time, when you're supporting something, you seem to be supporting the exact opposite of what you're actually supporting. And what does this mean? If I'm supporting as an LGBTQ whatever Hamas, well, I have some mental problems, because like we said in the past, a transgender individual will last 10 meters in Gaza and will be stoned and killed. So this is the truth. This is the truth. Then you can climb on walls, you can climb on mirrors, as they say, and you can create yourself a reality that accepts all these different inputs. But that's not really the case. Here we have a West which is increasingly weak, we have Islam that is advancing, and next month we will dedicate a much larger section because of my book, of course. So it will be, but at the time we also are focusing on America. So what is happening here in America? Here in America, this discussion we had about what kind of American are you? Now, when you go to the cinema today, you will see a lot less people than 10 years ago here in the United States, because people have less money, because people are less playful and joyful than they used to. They prefer to watch movies at home at times, isolate themselves, talk on Zoom rather than in reality.
Netflix.
Netflix and all the rest. Now, I heard from people who, go often to the cinema that nowadays there is a percentage, that doesn't even justify at times probably for these companies to bring out these movies. So at times you are also wondering, so how do they make money? Well, later on they make money, of course, through the streaming services, which is now the new way, like you just mentioned, Netflix. So movies are almost built up more for the streaming services than for the cinema.
Right.
In any case, going back to the subjects that we are observing from this specific movie, in this movie, of course, during the whole course of the movie, you don't really know who is behind it all, but you understand that a certain alliance has been built by these Western forces constituted Texas and California, with Florida leaning in their direction. And you understand that at that point, some generals have gone rogue, a little bit like in 1860, and that we are in front not only of a civil unrest, but also of a military division. It's not like we see the civilians fighting the military in a clash that opposes the two, and that's it. No, we saw military fighting military, which creates also a little bit of confusion amongst the people, because, of course, if there is a civil war, part of the military will follow their own views, and the other will follow their own view. I mean, it's like today, especially in the last few years, why has Joe Biden, why has Obama before him pushed for changes in the military spectrum, facilitating at times the recruitment of transgender individuals, and over actual people who might have actually been able to fight the war? They prefer to have some kind of drag queen or some other guy who is operated, prioritizing basically sexuality over efficiency. Okay. And it's something that already puts the military in a weak spot. But this happens in the recruitment, even at the CIA. We saw recruitment videos that were made public. I don't know if you remember, some time ago, Chantelle, they made public these cartoons of recruitment videos for the CIA about, my mother was actually married with another woman, and I was grown up. The story goes like this, and then suddenly she manifests herself and she wants to work at the CIA. So the thing here is that at one point it's obvious that if we ever go towards a civil war, there will be part of the military, part of the intelligence service, of the security service, that will split up, and so they have modern equipment. So it's not a war. What we see in the movie is not a war fought with primitive equipment on one side and modern equipment on the other. It's modern equipment clashing, because there is entire states that are clashing with each other. The fact that Thomas Jefferson, which is really fundamental here in America. Even when I was studying to become American, had to go through the whole history of the United States and study the importance of Thomas Jefferson. Thomas Jefferson once said that we need to renew at times this patriotism, this nation, through blood, to guarantee the freedom and liberty. This is very important to understand, that we never really reached any freedom without a sacrifice. And I think that the conflict that there is in this film, though, doesn't seem to have an objective. And that is the problem here. There is not an objective, because in the past we saw civil wars, of course, but then there was an objective. In 1860s, the objective was to free American slaves, to fight slavery, to arrive to what Abraham Lincoln declared was the Emancipation, the Emancipation Act, that basically freed the slaves. So there was an objective. But what is the objective really here? Is the objective the fact that me and my neighbor don't think alike? That my neighbor is an asshole who thinks Trump is an asshole, or that my neighbor is an asshole who thinks Joe Biden is a hero, and I know that the guy has ruined the nation. So it's becoming a civil war of words that has been triggered also by what people in the 1860s definitely didn't have, which is social media. So, I mean, social media have changed.
Isn't this the spiritual warfare, though, that we're talking about? I mean, would this not be, we hear about at this time, there's a lot of spiritual warfare. So, even though it can be kind of masqueraded, if you will, as politics, but behind the scenes, there's a lot more. I mean, yes, with things like social media, with obviously movies, television, all sorts of stuff like that. People have got their own opinions about things. So it's a lot more war of the words, but these words don't.
But the word of the words, though, becomes psychological operation, propaganda. Electronic warfare, people might not know this, but in the books of espionage, when you study for becoming a spy, they actually tell you that the first electronic warfare was fought in the first civil war, in the only civil war we ever had in 1860, and it was through the telegraph. So that was
no way, through the telegram. That's insane! Wow, I had no idea about that.
So that is really the birth of the electronic warfare. And when you
true.
Yeah,
that's true.
So nowadays, when you are within the intelligence community, of course, you talk about OMINT and all these other terminologies that basically indicate gathering of intelligence through various means. Especially nowadays, of course, there is the human intelligence, but most of all nowadays there is the technological intelligence that is in some way gathered technologically. So I think that we are definitely in a different situation today regarding a civil war, which, like we said today, has been of words up until now, and we hope it stays a civil war of words. But of course, the emotions are not artificial. They are real. The emotions that the people manifest on the internet, regardless of their silly nicknames or regardless of the fact that they are manifesting themselves as anonymous or just as plain trolls, they are manifestation of something. So
exactly.
I mean, I think that with this movie in particular, we see a lot of confusion. We see, of course, paraded in front of us again the figure of the journalist, the war correspondent, which is nobilitated. Because up until now, think about it, up until 2024, especially in the last few years, there has been a decline of the journalist figure, of the correspondent, that has gradually transformed himself in a mere spokesman for the elite. Without
absolutely.
Nothing incredible has come out of, they give these Pulitzer Awards to people that have definitely not changed the world. So I think that today we see with that movie also an attempt to rehabilitate the figure of the war correspondent. I don't know how realistic it is, because, like I said, today war correspondents are picked up from the airport, brought into a hotel which is safe and surrounded by security, private mercenaries, whatever, and they are there corresponding for a war zone, which is actually very safe. They are not. Some have attempted, with the recent war in Ukraine, some have attempted to become war correspondents again. How did they end up? Killed.
Exactly. I was going to say, like,
arrested.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Arrested when they talk too much the truth. So they were eliminated from the public discourse. There was this a journalist, you remember, that ended up being arrested by the Ukrainians and ended up mysteriously dying in prison. So we find ourselves, of course, really thinking, is this a civil war movie an attempt to rehabilitate the figure of the journalist? But in reality, it's no longer like that. So
yeah, I think times have changed a lot right now, you know. And it's also, I think, again, with all the social media and stuff going on, and everyone has got something to say about stuff. I think journalism generally has changed. I mean, if you're looking at really the way it is, I mean, media is anyway controlled by like 4 Illuminati operators, if you will. So, I mean, I think we've understood journalism, or the media, which includes a lot of journalists. Yes, we do. We every now and again you're going to get your rogue journalist type thing, but they really are controlled by the monopoly. So I think you know, yeah. I mean, it's interesting that, because there would be those, and I'm wondering, you know, as you say, they're going into these places and getting mysteriously killed. Who's actually killing them? Are they welcome there? What aren't they allowed to be talking about? You know, what aren't they allowed to be spreading? I guess it's always been that way, though, right? Just not as controlled. But who knows? I mean, it's just such a crazy time.
Of course, when it comes down to, because we just discussed a moment ago, human intelligence, HUMINT, which is one of the forms of intelligence, together with SIGINT, TIMINT, and all the other forms of intelligence based on signal intelligence, on interpersonal communication. We can say that human intelligence has always had an element that is linked to journalism, because journalists were the ones who were traveling around, could see
aren't
things.
We the rogue? I mean, if you look at it this way nowadays, aren't we, you know, people like you and I, for example, aren't we more like the rogue journalists? Not that we are journalists, but we kind of spreading.
Well, I personally am. I did at one point work as a journalist, so I can say, I can say that
I did. Easily for you, yeah. But it's like, carry on, sorry.
What I can say from my own experiences, because I grew up studying and working at one point in a redazione, as they say in Italy, in a famous newspaper which was called La Repubblica. My journalist teacher was the Dino D'Arcangelo, the late Dino D'Arcangelo, who was a great journalist, mostly involved with the entertainment world, because you know, we discussed also prior to the show, you know, my past as a DJ, as a record producer. I liked a lot of the entertainment world, but I learned a lot from being within such an important news setup. Today, I will never, of course, even I don't know. I mean, that newspaper in particular is linked, is actually part of the Benedetti, who is linked to Rothschild. So I mean, it would be like my worst nightmare to be working in that environment. But I learned a lot. I learned a lot about how journalists work. In the past, I still kept my close contacts, and I still have them, with a lot of journalists that are still my friends in Italy, especially. But it is, of course, a job that goes with a lot of compromises. In fact, a lot of them sometimes don't want to even associate publicly with me because they say, "Oh, Leo."
Exactly. I have some good friends who are journalists as well, really good friends. And in fact, with one of them during the COVID time, and thankfully now that's not the case. We've kind of rekindled our friendship, but we nearly ended our friendship, or shall I say, he nearly ended his friendship with me because of my stand on the zapper, right? And really just looking at things in general. But another friend of mine as well, she's also a great journalist. I mean, when I start talking about the stuff that we talk about, she just says, I don't want to hear it. I can't hear it. I've got a report. I mean, they are so inundated with reporting other stuff that the news feed is overflowing with, that this stuff, she says to me, I don't know how you do what you do. I don't know how you deal with the stuff you deal with. I'm going, but I shouldn't be dealing with this stuff. You should be dealing with this stuff. You know, you guys are the ones with the frontline newspapers and magazines and stuff. Why do we have to sit here battling? They all understand, you know, it's like an understood thing that they get fed a whole lot of BS, but they just swallow it anyway. So I find that interesting. I mean, how long is this still going to last? That we have journalists.
I think that amongst my friends, personally, my own experience, I still have, for example, a friend who works for Vanity Fair in Italy, who used to be a war correspondent, who is actually the author of the first 2 covers of my books, by the way, because he's a very famous photographer. He used to work even with Andy Warhol back in the days. I mean, this guy's an artist, but he's at the same time also being a war correspondent. And I think that with him, we still share a great friendship, regardless of our political disagreements of sorts, because he understands really the compromises he's been subject to. He doesn't tend to do any compromises, and that's why he left the world of written journalism, preferring to photograph things, because when you photograph things, you're not commenting them. You're just, you know, right. That is the fact. Right. You're photographing something that can be debated. It's in front of you. Then you debate it. So Gerard is a great guy, and I still love to be in contact with him. And he's a rather older gentleman nowadays. So I think he's now approaching his 70s, but he's still sharp. Still, you know, we can have a talk, laugh, and we agree to disagree at times, but it is a great and the same can be said also for other friends of mine who also are involved with financial kind of journalism, and but when it comes to war correspondents, well, that is another thing. It seems like they are a dying breed. It seems like right. There's no real war journalism being done any longer. And unfortunately, right. I think that the last remains of war journalism were erased with this latest conflict in Ukraine. And we have seen then also during the war in Gaza, journalists being killed like flies. Now, because they're no longer seen as journalists, they're no longer seen as objective. They're seen as part of the
Exactly.
So that is what's happening here now. Regarding the movies, the movie in particular, Civil War, that we are discussing today, which of course is the subject of our show. There is also, of course, I think a moment when, you know, what kind of American are you is, of course, presented from a guy with a machine gun who looks like the typical patriot who will defend, you know, like, and apparently the actor went through a whole research for these glasses he wears, you know, they had to be in a certain way, you know, So
Top Gun, or something.
I apologize. My memory for names, actor names, is not that great. But in any case, the guy was actually acting also in other things. I think he acted in Breaking Bad. He acted in Better Call Saul. No, in that movie El Camino, whatever. He's a actor that is an upcoming actor who definitely does a very good portrait of this character. But at the same time, we see, how they want to present the patriots, the ones who are armed. Here in America, we have 300 million guns. We have 300 million guns. Now, people will say, this is because you have the Second Amendment, and that is really what the left has a problem with. The Second Amendment, which was built in reality from the very start to defend this republic on which we stand. Because the core idea behind the Second Amendment, of course, to defend the First Amendment, so the liberty of freedom of expression, of religion, is a concept that for people outside of the United States might be a little bit awkward to understand. But right. The father founders knew that if we didn't give the guns to everybody here, there will be a day in which some crooks will come and will, of course, take away all your rights, like they have attempted to do over and over again. And we see that since the arrival of Joe Biden, and even before with Hillary Clinton, the instrumentalization of institutions like the FBI, like the NSA, the CIA, these institutions are being used to favor one political part over the other.
Yeah, absolutely.
This is very anti-American. So it's very anti-American. It goes against what the founders of this incredible nation, which is still an experiment, is in an experiment that needs to be protected. The moment in which we start fighting the candidate in the presidential race with a number of accusations and trials that basically keep him from the presidential run, and I'm talking, of course, here about Donald J. Trump.
Yeah.
We are showing our weakness, but we're also showing the injustice, and we are showing a side of America that we never really thought we would see, because this kind of things is normal in South Africa, is normal in some other country in the middle of nowhere, all the countries in South America, where, people are, okay, Lula doesn't like Bolsonaro. Okay, Bolsonaro will not be able to participate to any further race politically. If you do anything else, we're going to arrest you. Okay, whatever. And this happens in all these countries where the judiciary is used to block the political discourse when it's not agreeing with them. I saw it happening in Italy. In Italy, in the middle of the 90s, we had the end of the so-called First Republic and the arrival of Silvio Berlusconi. When Silvio Berlusconi arrived with his Forza Italia, which, of course, it was a party built by Freemasons with the mafia, and all that. We can say whatever you want. It was an anti-communist establishment built on the ruins of Gladio, which is the say-behind operation that basically was protecting from the communists. But the moment in which he arrived as prime minister, the first thing they did was to unleash a series of never-ending cases against him. And the guy was much worse than Trump, of course, when it comes to the ladies. He had like an harem of ladies, the bunga bunga and whatnot. So at one point, after years and years of going on with these never-ending cases, they managed to force him on a corner and say, Silvio, you pay 500 million to the Benedetti, which is the owner of the newspaper I mentioned earlier, La Repubblica, and other, or otherwise, we will, that is, you have to pay this 500 million is a lot of money. We saw it with Trump. He couldn't manifest 500 million cash like this. So, on the contrary of Donald J. Trump, Silvio Berlusconi bowed down to the enemy, said, okay, that's it. I don't want to compromise the future assets of my family's business for politics. And from that moment onwards, Berlusconi never mentioned again the word communist. He was never again prime minister. He was immediately substituted by a guy called Mario Monti, who is part of the Bilderberg Club, one of the heads of the Bilderberg Club, part of the Trilateral Commission, all the rest. And he became a puppet that, until his death, didn't do much than just saying, oh, when I was in charge, for 20 years. But if we go and see what happened to Berlusconi, it was exactly what is happening now to Donald J. Trump. The difference is that Donald J. Trump is not, at least up until now, bowing down completely, because already the fact that last week we had this big sudden news that Mike Johnson and a bunch of Republicans will endorse this bill that gives billions and billions for wars that we as Americans are not interested in fighting or supporting. And I'm talking about the Ukrainian, so 60 and plus billions to that crook of Zelensky, with the head of the CIA even saying, please don't steal them. We know you're stealing them. The guy actually said, don't steal them. I mean, he knows the guy's a crook. Then you have the war, more money for Israel. And by the way, also 6 billion to Hamas, just to make everybody happy. Just a bit of money to Hamas, a bit of money to Israel. So the wars are never ending. And then we have, of course, money for the future war, because we have to invest also in the future war. That is Taiwan.
War. I mean, invariably, they're always backed by the same people. It's a great big money-making racket, because, not only, think about what it does spiritually, the chaos and the trauma and the pain and the suffering that is created from wars is exactly what these awful people want, right? It's the energy that they're after as well, because remember, the energetics creates the genetics, or creates the physicality. So the trauma of the war, all of that. And then, of course, it's a money-making racket. So it's a well-known fact.
So that money-making racket is a uniparty, that is both parties, not one party.
Yes, that's what I'm saying.
It's about corruption. It's about evil,
totally.
And about people who really hate us because they feel privileged, that they have reached, maybe Washington, or they have reached any capital of the world as politicians. They sit on their chair and they have the lobbyists and the warmongers of the military-industrial complex that basically instigate them for these wars. So it's what we describe here as deep state. Is corrupt oligarchy. It's a corporate, fascist, totalitarian vision. It is clear that this enemy is not Republican or Democrat. It's a uniparty.
But it's also, when you look at the shadow government and the shadow military, it's different. I would say they're actually all the same, but you're obviously having the puppets in the front, who often don't realize they're being puppeteered, if you will. But it's run by a very dark evil humans, who are destroying. You just look at, if you know a guy called John Perkins, I've actually interviewed him before, and I'll be interviewing him again next week, author of Confessions of an Economic Hitman.
I actually cited him in one of my books.
All right, yeah, he's very amazing, actually. And he was part of the teams that used to go out to the third world countries. You see, the third world countries are the countries that have many, many resources, like Africa, like Panama, like Asia, like all those countries, where they would go out and corrupt the governments. And if they wouldn't get that right, if the economic hitman wouldn't get it right, then they'd send in the jackals. And then if the jackals, which they would then assassinate the guys. And if they did not get that right, then they'd send in the military industrial complex. So this has been going on since forever. And in fact, now what's happening is the Chinese have pretty much taken over that from the Americans, basically. The Chinese are now the top economic hitmen. But what he's telling me, and I'm interested, and I'm very interested because I'm going to be speaking to him about this next week. In fact, next week, same time, I'm going to be speaking to him where he's talking like the Chinese. You know what the Chinese do? They watch and they're going to see all the mistakes that people make and they perfect the mistakes and they do it 10 times better, right? So it's like how the Chinese, and as you said in the beginning of the show, have now gone in and actually being the great corruptors. I mean, the three main powers, America, China, Russia. Okay. Russia, I remember in Africa, America has always been in Africa though, but in the 70s, 80s, Russia was big in Africa. They were training the African National Congress. Putin was in here and all the comrades were doing their thing. And that's one of the reasons. I don't know if you guys know, remember a guy called Chris Hani. Chris Hani was, in fact, he was assassinated in 1993, a few months before our first democratic election, when Nelson Mandela came in. But he was backed by the Russians, and I'm pretty sure, in fact, I have no doubt that that's why Hani was taken out, because he was getting too powerful for Mandela. Because Mandela, in fact, couldn't, he was always the sweetheart of South Africa and Africa, actually, but he was backed by the Americans, and he was an Oppenheimer puppet. And so Hani was for the Russians. So they had to take Hani out because that meant Russia would then get more power in Africa. It's insane. I mean, when you start looking at these things, and now Russia disappeared, and since then China's come in. So it's actually insane when you're looking at what happens and how the bully boys of the planet. And I'm not saying it's the people. I'm saying it's the people. It's the evil force that has infiltrated the main powers and the most powerful countries, continents, whatever, to play ball with them. So, the only people that really benefit are a few wealthy families like the presidents and their families, really. And they come in striking these deals in these third world countries. But then what happens is no one benefits from these deals except a few of the elite families. And that's how, of course, they then put these countries into debt. They can't pay the debt back, and then they usurp their resources. It's disgusting. It's disgusting. And whoever has been responsible for that, they need to pay the price. I'm sorry. You can't, just because you can do something does not mean you should. Just because you have the power to strong arm somebody else or another country or another continent does not mean you should. There's something called karma, and karma is really reaping what you've sowed. It's cause and effect. I mean, if you want to look at it in another way, it's cause and effect. And it's the same thing. It's like what you're saying about Biden, Ukraine, Zelensky. They're all just puppets. Zelensky's a puppet. He's been puppeteered. Why is America backing Ukraine so much, or the Biden administration? Why are so many millions and billions of dollars gone into the Ukraine? Right? I mean, I think we know why, but I mean that's more like a generic question. But that's what I'm saying. There are a few people that are pulling the strings on this planet. And it's time that changes. So when we the people, and that's why I say people like us on these channels, and there's quite a few of us, thank God, and there are a lot of them that are corrupt as well. This truther community. I mean, they've been infiltrated as well. They speak a whole lot of shit. So there are a few of us who have the interest of humanity at heart. I don't care what race, color, creed, nationality, or wherever you come from. If you're a human being and it's your intention to do good in the world, then let's do it. You know what I'm saying? But it's been going on for too long, and it has to end. And money, unfortunately, is the the abuse of their power and money has been, because power and money and sex, of course, sex is always sex involved, but it's money, power, and sex are always the things that corrupt people. So the day we can realize that when the last animal has been slaughtered, when the last tree has been cut down, you cannot eat the dollar bill. It's that simple. We have to restore our planet. We have to keep the resources going. We have to maintain equilibrium, balance, because as long as we're not maintaining a balance and thinking that money is going to be the thing that saves us, we're screwed. It's as simple as that. Yeah?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And to go back to this film, at one point we also notice that there is two characters that their parents have stayed in their farms in Missouri and Colorado without really being affected, because they are pretending there is no civil war. And one wonders if there will be really the possibility, if a civil war erupts, to continue to work, your own farm in peace, or just to live without becoming part of all this madness. And I think that this movie demonstrates that would be impossible at one point. And at the same time, the whole civil war thing is based on this Nick Hoffman as the president of the United States, who is a dictatorial president that in some way might refer to a distorted vision they have of Donald J. Trump. So it's almost like they are preparing, if Trump wins, well, then we're going to unleash hell and it's going to be civil war. Like I said earlier, the figure of the war correspondent will in reality to be the war photojournalist, because when you are a war journalist, you are a war photojournalist. Like I said, my friend Gerard Bruno is one who went many times to Afghanistan and other places, and she's the protagonist, Kirsten Dunst. Jesse Piedmont, who is the guy who said what kind of American, in reality does a minor role, but in reality that minor role seems to become a key role when you see it, because Piedmont didn't really want to even was not credited for the role, but he became famous because he's holding at gunpoint this journalist. It becomes a very important moment of this movie. These journalists these photojournalists who have gone for many years around the world to report on wars and say we will have never imagined this will happen in our own nation, right. America. It's a shock, of course. There is in particular a Reuters journalist from Florida in the movie, which is basically Wagner Manicoba de Moura, which is a Brazilian actor. He is the war journalist who I'm talking about, who is obviously these figures are viewing the American patriots in a negative way. They're portraying it in a negative way. The whole outcome of the movie in the end is to overthrow this president of the United States, which is seen as a dictatorial president. And so one wonders, is this just a preparation, a pre-programming, like many times has happened with Hollywood, on what will happen if Trump wins, on how they're going to oust him out, with a coup that might happen within the American military that will inevitably divide the United States. And so it's sad to see
it's
that.
Already divided, though. I mean, if you look at the whole...
Divided, like we said earlier, divided in words is one thing. Divided that you start shooting at your neighbor is a different thing. So right. the actual movie itself, even if it seemingly doesn't take sides, it does imply that the existing government will be defeated. And the question is, who or what will take their place? Because, okay, fine, right. You're going to defeat this dictator, And that's how they're gonna probably portray Trump if he wins another term, sadly. But it is unlikely that a republic will be reborn from the ashes of this empire of death, delusion, and decay. So, because America is founded by people who had great ideals for this and great ideas of what this nation could achieve. What are you achieving by brutally brutal fight amongst people of the same nation, that it becomes a divided nation? And so that what kind of American are you is a very important and key question that still goes over and over in I think in the heads of all the people who have viewed this movie or viewed the trailer of it.
Because it really is, it's kind of like, sorry, when you're looking at these movies, I'm trying to think of that Obama movie that was on a few months ago as well.
Yes.
It really, it's kind of like, what these creatures of the night have to do. They've got to tell us all the time in plain sight what they're doing. So it makes one wonder if this is part of
we discussed it I think a few months ago. The Leave the World Behind, that film on Netflix.
Yes, that's the one.
Yes. We discussed it. We kind of were trying to understand what was happening there. And there were definitely some predictive programming there, especially when it comes to the ship that loses control, just like the one that destroyed the bridge and just goes out of control because it's been hacked. Because the truth about that ship that has destroyed the bridge in Baltimore, I don't think will ever be revealed fully to us. And it is strikingly similar to how Obama, because Obama is the actual producer, but also much more than the producer. If you remember, we discussed the fact that Obama and Michelle kind of got involved a little bit more than in the production, also in the story and in the narrative of this story and how it should be portrayed. I saw that movie and I understood that Obama kind of wanted to be present even through one of the main protagonists that kind of resembles him. So Leave the World Behind is about also electromagnetic, and here in Volume 8 of my Confessions, I discussed extensively the use of electromagnetic weapons and the so-called Cuban syndrome, because it affected the people from the American embassy in Cuba and in other parts of the world, and it's said to be the result of weapons that were probably used by either Chinese or Russians, of course. And so I think that Leave the World Behind is almost like a anticipation. It's like writing a foreword for a movie that is about to manifest, and then Civil War becomes that manifestation. It's like, I don't think that the Obamas could have openly produced and endorsed a movie like Civil War because it would have been too controversial for them.
Yeah, exactly.
So they left it to the prequel, to the anticipation of it, which is, by the way, both movies are produced, I think, by A24. I think they are both of the same production company in any case. So it is part
shows
of
you. Just shows you definitely some dodginess going on there.
Absolutely. But I would like to read these two lines by Thomas Jefferson in a letter to John Adams. The tree of liberty must be refreshed from time to time with the blood of patriots and tyrants. It is its natural manure. So this is what the Second Amendment is built for. It's built to fight those tyrants who, like in the case of Mao Zedong, when he arrived in power in China, the first thing he did was to take all the guns from the Chinese. And the Chinese today are the most passive, obedient, enslaved nation of the whole planet. They don't have any say, any right, nothing. That's what means giving in all your guns. So yes, we have 300 million guns, but those 300 million guns are also made to guarantee our freedom. However, however, like I explained in volume 9, but I also explained in volume 6 and volume 7, which are the trilogy of Cyber Satan. This is a temporary freedom when the AI is advancing so much, robotics is advancing so much. There will be a moment in which, yes, we have the guns, but if the thing that we have in front of us is not even a human, is a robot with a gun, who doesn't, who can be shielded by bullets that we can shoot. Well, I mean, you will need a bazooka. So today, there is states like, for example, California, or Hawaii is the worst state for gun owners in America. Hawaii is the worst of the worst. In Hawaii, in fact, you basically don't have the Second Amendment, because you have so many restrictions that make Hawaii, the ownership of guns, impossible in Hawaii. That's okay. It's their own choice, whatever. I'm highly critical of it, but Hawaii was, after all, a later acquisition of the United States of America. However, when it comes to California, instead, we see that there is a lot of restrictions on high-capacity magazine, high-capacity weapons with the magazine that of course, permit a sort of... So you have a lot of limitations on all those weapons that are seen in the movie paraded by those patriots. Here in California, on the contrary of Nevada or even or Arizona, you can't really... It's really difficult to purchase an AK-47 legally and to have that kind of machine guns legally in your own home. And they have made it really difficult and more difficult. Why? Because California it's the next step. I mean, it's basically China. It's basically the Popular Republic of California. It's a communist hellhole, and I live here and I understand that. But if I legally want to defend myself, here in California, the only ones who have those kind of guns are the Mexican cartels that are coming in and out like it's their own country. So you can be critical as much as you want about other states that have less restrictive laws, but then we are giving the possibility to these crooks, these criminals, to now have created, especially in the San Diego region, the biggest problem with immigration. And who are the people who are taking advantage of this big problem is the Chinese that are flooding in like flies here from San Diego, invading our country. Some of them are spies, some of them are basically potential terrorists controlled by China for future sabotage of our electric grid, of our water, of our everything. So we are letting these people in through the help of the Mexican cartels, a bunch of crooks and criminals who are protected by a Mexican president who is a socialist criminal, so who is bringing in this country fentanyl that is produced in China, then worked out in Mexico. I mean, this is really, it was only news of this morning that San Diego is becoming people will imagine there is a lot more people coming in through Texas or New Mexico, but it's not the case. They are coming here because here the Chinese know that they have the support of the Chinese Grand Lodge of Chinese Freemasons in San Francisco, that controls. Then we have all the triads that are controlled by the Hung, because the Chinese Freemasons are not regular Freemasons. They control the Hongmen. They control basically the Chinese mafia. So, is it okay for us to not have machine guns in our possession when we have enemies coming in and flooding California? No. This is like shooting yourself in the foot every day. And actually, if you want to, you can give me just a hammer and break my balls. So this is what they're doing, because they are castrating ourselves. And this is
Right.
why California is because we have a governor who is a traitor.
Right. Exactly.
Who is selling out California to the Chinese. And we have seen also what it means to receive Xi Jinping like a hero here in California. But in the last 24 hours, actually, the Chinese themselves were critical of that whole thing. Nothing good really came out of it. There is still friction, and the Chinese, of course, they will always smile at you and say, why don't you join us in our Sino-Russian world order and all work out this thing so we can make Cyber Satan, artificial intelligence, our ultimate goal, and work all together for 2030 and all bow down to Satan altogether. That is what the dragon wants. That is what the dragon wants.
Exactly.
And
exactly.
Fortunate, but that is a big problem. So when we see in this film the fact that California teams up hypothetically with Texas, it seems almost, and Florida seems obviously fiction, and it is fiction, thanks God. It is fiction, and it will stay fiction if they don't continue to flood the frontiers of the United States with illegal immigrants, because then it's not going to be fiction anymore. If you let Texas, you let all these illegal immigrants through Texas for another 5 or 10 years, then Texas is going to be transformed in another democratic hellhole. And the same can be said for Florida. Of course, everybody is very critical of Governor DeSantis, who is so restrictive and this and that and all the other, but in the end is only trying to preserve a state which, let's not forget, during the pandemic was, without saying more because otherwise they will probably censor us on this platform. The fact is that, of course, the freedom that was guaranteed in Florida during the pandemic was not the freedom that we saw in other parts of the United States. And it's very indicative. Very indicative. So we saw in the last 24 hours how the justice works in New York. You are basically overturning a decision on one of the worst maniacs of Hollywood, Harvey Weinstein, and you are at the same time giving us a daily account of how Trump paid or not paid this woman or this other woman. Who cares? Harvey Weinstein was a rapist. To my knowledge, Donald J. Trump was never a rapist. But in the judiciary of New York City, and that's why now William Bragg, who is in charge of this whole show, is kind of saying, oh, well, now we're going to have to reopen another case against Weinstein. Of course, because the criticism that they will get, even from the libtards of the so-called Me Too movement, well, it will be pretty intense. And this, at the same time, it's happening with other things. I mean, the leftist cities are also in decay, are manifesting a decline of America that we have never seen before. Shops are closing in Beverly Hills every day. LA is fueled by encampments at every corner. I personally don't go because I find it sad. For me, personally, it's sad to see. It's sad to view a city that was once it was a place where everybody wanted to go to become famous, and nowadays it's another fentanyl meth crisis in front of our eyes, with zombies walking from one side to the other. It's not really what America is all about. And the same can be said in many other cities in America, from Austin, Texas, that is now no longer what it used to be. And that's why you see on one side, Austin, Texas, in the universities, in the campuses of these universities, of this college, all these people that are basically shouting about Palestine. Why don't you shout about your own town, which is becoming
exactly.
a shit? Why don't you protest about the people who are dying in front of our eyes, people who are defecating in front of our eyes, who are transforming once beautiful Venice Beach in a shadow of a place from hell?
Yeah,
so
exactly.
So here we have all these cities that have been taken over by corrupt politics, and the results are in front of our eyes. So when basically they are talking about civil war, there is already a civil war going on in this city. It's a war of survival that the people have to do.
Yes.
And at the same time have to witness that maybe if you are in California, you can go in a shop and steal $946 of stuff and nobody will say anything. You just put it in your thing, you go walk out, and that's it.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Laws that don't defend the shop owners, the restaurant owners, that inevitably will close down and will create more and more ghettos filled up by people who are, like I said, zombies, because these drugs that they are using, they are no longer the drugs of our generation, but these are the drugs
the whole new, and also this whole transgenderism thing, and they're turning, like with these whatever it is they're putting into humans nowadays. We're not humans really anymore. If you think about it, we've been compromised. Literally, there's a compromise of the human species. That is really, and as you say, that you rightly said, the lawlessness, the zombies, it's just a whole new brainwashing culture. And I'm sorry, in the last 4 or 5 years, however long Biden's been in there, that for me, I have seen a massive shift for the negative regarding this, just the whole sexualization of kids, from these drag queens going into preschools and doing their sex shows there, from these kids that are now being allowed to mutilate their bodies without their parents' permission. Stuff like that. It's a whole, you're seeing youngsters going to universities, normal, cool, achieving kids. 2 or 3 years later, they come out of there and they're full of tattoos. They've got now 1 million piercings.
This is becoming a natural progression. And I talked about Embolium 8 a lot, where, I focus a lot on Hollywood. And we saw popular actors in Hollywood, just their sons and daughters suddenly turning out to be women rather than men, but they are fluid. They're not fluid. They claim to be a woman while they're men. All this rubbish. Gender confusion is part of it, definitely. Gender
that's the whole satanic agenda. if you look at Baphomet,
but now also we have this truth that is kind of coming out even from their own media about what was going on in Nickelodeon, what was going on in Disney world, like all these children shows from the 90s and even, of course, much earlier, were built up gradually to arrive to this point in which, so that is the point here, to destroy their innocence and sexualize the youngsters, because we have also a bunch of sexual predators like Joe Biden, who is the president of the United States and goes around sniffing kids.
Not only sniffing them, I've seen his son in
And
very
not only
compromising positions, photographs.
absolutely, and we know also about those diaries in which the diary in particular of his of his daughter who was recently saw somebody going in jail for actually revealing a truth that should be in every newspaper in the United States, these improper showers that the father was doing with the daughter. So we're talking about incest aside from pedophilia. I mean, we are having a guy who is no better than Borgia Pope 500 years ago in the way of perversion and decadence. This is really
the question is who's protecting him and why? Because any decent, any half decent adult man or woman would never let a pervert get away with that. So my point is, if they're protecting him, then you got to know they're all in on it. Because that's what the secret brotherhood does. It's why it's called secret. They will keep their secrets. They blackmail each other. They have got photographs and movies of each other doing disgusting things. So all of them are guilty of that. So at the end of the day, seriously, we just need to blow it all up. Maybe not literally, well, maybe literally, and really just, it's time for a whole new leadership in this world.
But the problem, Chantelle, the problem is that the more powerful they become, these predators in power, and the less we seem to be critical of them because we have too much to lose. You see, so that is what's happening here. These people who are these sexual predators build around them a professional setup that in a way shields them from anything, because what, are you going to go against the president of the United States? Are you going to go against that powerful CEO or that film director in Hollywood or that other guy producer who has so much power? No, you will go against them only if you want to destroy your own career. So it's like you are invited to compromise, and that is really the especially in Europe. I noticed there was a lot of passivity, and it was a lot of looking the other way.
Right.
The Vatican.
Look at the Catholic Church. I mean, look at the Catholic Church and their pedophile priests. I mean, seriously. I mean, that's been talked about for decades and decades already, and everyone turns away from that. So really, when we look at them,
but then really going back to Biden, because we just mentioned him the other day when he kind of like invited almost the people to just give him a straight left, meaning a punch in the face of Trump, even if after he said, "Oh, I don't want," he laughed. He said, "Oh, I didn't really mean," but it is about aggression now. It's about aggression, and in that aggression, it's felt like, for example, yesterday Biden said, "Oh, Trump, it's like." The bleach that he told you to inject during he's actually went to his hair and made his hair blonde. I mean, it's like, what kind of discourse is that between? I mean, it's a lower of lower. I mean, we are discussing a presidential race, and we have really arrived to this pitty talk between. It's not really, and I think that even Trump was kind of shocked about the level we are reaching here in this discourse. Of course, he's no perfect man. There is no perfect man when you come to a system which basically is not about the ideas of the side. If I want to present myself tomorrow, and I can't because, of course, I wasn't born in America, I can eventually become a member of Congress or whatever, but not a president. But if I could present myself, I will not be able to do so because I don't have the money, because it's money that talks here. It's not the ideas. It's not that Leo Zagami has a great new idea for a great new America. No, it doesn't work like this. Leo Zagami doesn't have the billions. Leo Zagami can't participate to the race. If Leo Zagami, was a billionaire, tomorrow morning I will be able to participate to any kind of race, because it is buying yourself your position of power, which is possible only through money. So we are, of course, in front of some limitations when a democracy is built around a system that is basically giving the possibility only to people who have had an economic success, or have people that are willing to invest, like Obama. Obama wasn't a rich guy. Obama was, of course, he became rich, but Obama, as we know, was involved in politics for a long time. He found the people that could give him the right backing, and then he launched himself. And he nowadays, though, demonstrates over and over again that he is a puppet of other people, like Soros, who have financed him.
He sold himself a long time ago. Obama sold out.
He sold himself the moment he wanted to achieve the presidency, because, like I said, you cannot achieve here. The system is built in a way that is limited. So I will go back to a democracy that talks words rather than talks money only. That, I mean, if we had the possibility to really bring forward our ideas in a contest where, you know, these ideas will be embraced without, because there is actually the possibility of doing politics without money, well, that would be great. I mean, but it's not happening. It's not going to happen here in the United States. And so it's not going to happen in the United States. And in other countries, instead, it's all about the elite positioning their own, like they did in the case of Emmanuel Macron, the Rothschild family, putting Emmanuel Macron there as president of France. Or who is Rishi Sunak, the prime minister of England? He's a guy who has a lot of money.
Yeah, exactly.
And so it's really sad to see this state of things. But of course, in going back to the Civil War that we have discussed today, the film basically leaves you, I think, with the sense of sadness about something that seems almost inevitable, and that is really the final take on this movie that we can give today. We have migrants going wild in the cities of the United States because they are let loose by a government who basically is incentivizing the entrance of millions only to achieve their vote. That's what they're doing. That is, you know, we have these idiots, young people, young people, millennials, they seem to be brainwashed. They seem to be just creators of app creatures.
Yeah.
They are not human beings anymore. Technology has molded them, has crafted them, has generated these monsters who go around shouting, you know, death to Israel with the Hamas flag, not understanding anything of from the river to the sea. And I remember watching a couple of days ago an interview. Somebody asked to one of these protesters, "What does it mean from a river to sea?" "Ah, well, there is a river in Israel." You know, I mean, it's like they don't really understand the fact that from a river to sea basically being destruction, elimination, complete of Israel. And at the same time, of course, we have within Israel a lot of problems, because Israel, it's just like any other Western country, corrupt by the Sabbath and Frankie, by the leftist mafia that is a produce of the Illuminati. I think that in the end, the elite is achieving their goal. Their goal is being achieved. The people are being just brought into this whole thing that will ultimately manifest with a complete technological dictatorship, or like I explained in my books. They are being carried along, brought for a ride, but in the end, their protest is meaningful. It's just a way of making them create chaos in the streets, so that the people are influenced by watching them on TV. This is what is happening. So they create this protest, people going around and opposition to Trump, or opposition to this or that, supporting the Palestinian cause. But it's all done because then these things will be shown on TV. So the people will watch these things and will say, wow, the majority really wants this. When it's not the majority. It's not the majority. Today, the people who actually are protesting and all this are not the majority. The majority of us here in the United States is hardworking people who are trying to put together the money so they can pay their next bills. This is what they're not... the Palestinian. I don't give a damn about the Palestinian cause. I give a damn about the fact that I go to the gas station here in California, and the gasoline might be $6 or $7. That is what happened. That is my concern here.
Right.
And I don't care about Zelensky and about his war, but his war has brought me to pay $6 and $7 at the gas station.
Exactly.
So, and the same thing can be said also with what is happening in Israel, because 26 billion and other 6 billion to Hamas and all that. So I think that this civil war might be inevitable for Hollywood, but the majority of Americans don't want it. They just want to go along with their ordinary life, trying to revive what is left of the American dream. And this is really important. We all would like to achieve the American dream in some way or another. Even myself, when I moved here in 2019, I moved here with some expectations. And I hope that people understand that for me, becoming American is a great achievement, because I have lived in an oppressed dictatorship. I can say this openly nowadays that I'm American. Italy is an oppressed dictatorship. There was no freedom given after they liberated from the Nazi fascists, because it became another control environment in which the Italians have no more say, because Italians, like Japanese and Germans, were defeated, became slaves. The Japanese today are like this. They might at times do some protests, like they did recently regarding the WHO and of course certain things that happen, but in the end they are simply following the rest of the of the allies of the American NATO alliance, and at the same time, so we can see that Europe is bowing down, and it's I see these people this year. There is the European elections in June, and so they are pushing, again, vote this, vote that, we will change Europe, we will change this, they will change nothing. They will change absolutely nothing.
Right.
Europe is, like I explained in volume 7 of my Confessions, the Fourth Reich. Germany is Nazi Germany, it's still Nazi Germany, and it's still there pushing basically other countries, also like Spain and others, Greece, that have not given the same kind of weapons to Ukraine. They are actually, to this morning, they were very critical. Germany's been very critical because they haven't given as much as we are giving for this war effort in terms of military technology and missiles, this and that and all that. Well, maybe not everybody wants to this Fourth Reich, and let's not forget that the Ukrainians were with the Nazis in the Second World War, with the SS. So this is Nazism at its worst, that is unfortunately manifesting in front of our eyes. We even have Ursula von der Leyen.
It's interesting. You look at Operation Paperclip. I mean, which obviously after the Second World War,
Yes.
A whole lot of Nazis went over to America, right? And they were used for a lot of the technology, for the Germans that had the technology and the brain power to do lots of things. Yeah, I mean, it's so are we really surprised that there's all of that going on there? Because as far as I'm concerned, if you're going to take these guys over, there's and make no mistake, it happened here as well. Obviously not to the extent that it happened in America, but I mean, if you're looking at that whole situation, it doesn't surprise me that the Nazi ways are coming into full being. They've just been hiding it, and now it's just filtering through.
I mean, of course, we are, almost finishing today's episode, and we are about to say bye-bye to everybody, but we are preparing in a way also for next episode, for next month, because then you will see in my book, I will finally reveal all the connections between all these people who are anti-Semitic in the campuses, all this anti-Semitism in the Muslim world, the Middle East, and how it is connected with the Nazis and with Germany, guys. It's like, don't forget that Rudolf Hess was born in Egypt. Let's not forget that the network of German spies that was regarded as very important in the Middle East after the Second World War became a part of the American spy network. So it's here we're talking about real Nazis. We're not talking about, we're talking about real Nazis. And those idiots who think they are fighting the fascists or the Nazis in the university, or even 1 week ago, we had the biggest idiot setting himself on fire.
Exactly.
To protest Donald J. Trump with a manifesto criticizing fascists here, fascists there, and fascists everywhere, when, without one word about communism, and at the same time, without really a word about who created fascism, who created communism, which is the same people. Socialists, communists, fascists, all these ideologies are to be eliminated from the face of the earth. They were generated by the Illuminati. In 1776, the idea was to fight and destroy two things, the monarchies and the religions. And to do this, they eventually built up these ideologies. They went after the Tsar of Russia, the Kaiser of Germany, after every single monarch. And the only one that had stayed untouched, Great Britain.
Exactly. Ask yourself why, right? We got to ask ourselves why that is. Wow, very interesting.
Kind of like, untouched, and they were just and they were the worst Nazis of the whole bunch. We have images of the late. When she was still young, though.
When you look,
giving a straight Nazi salute.
But they are Nazis. Their original surname is German. I forget what it is now.
They are Hanoverians. They are basically Germans. Queen Victoria used to talk German, and within Freemasonry, there was a lodge that was created for all these Germans, which still operates to this day using the German language in Great Queen Street, which is called Pilgrim Lodge 238. And in that lodge, if we go and study that lodge, we will find the roots of Nazism.
Yeah, of all of that, exactly. No, I fully agree with you. I fully agree, and they're infiltrated all over. I mean, they really are. They've got their greasy little paws in everywhere, And
absolutely. We have also, somebody's pointing out on the House of Orange in the Netherlands, of course, also very important for the creation, let's not forget, of the Bilderberg Club, right? At the, the actual continent then had as a driving force also that. So we have also that. But the only monarchies that survived were the ones that, of course, had behind the scenes sold their soul to the devil. And the result we see today, though, is not a very good one, because when you sell your soul to the devil, and you ruin your karma, you ruin your health. Queen Elizabeth dies, King Charles is ill, Princess Kate has cancer. They say even Prince William has cancer. They will all die because you can
everybody gets their comeuppance. Everybody does. Yeah,
absolutely. So I'm very glad that we touched on this subject today, and I really hope ultimately that we never see a civil war here in America, because it will be a very bloody situation. There will be the blood of innocents, unfortunately, that will be sacrificed, and it will not be a great spectacle. It will be definitely, I mean, we saw the migration crisis now being a very important topic for these elections. But America doesn't want to become a third world country, and it's becoming a third world country. And if American collapses, ultimately there will be chaos all over the world, because the old world order will be substituted by a new world disorder before we will have ultimately another world order. However, the cost will be felt and it will be counted in lives. Remember,
but unfortunately, if we're looking at karma and getting our comeuppance, and again, I don't refer to the American people, because no, the American people are not like that, but the powers that be for many decades now have been destroying and stealing from third world countries. They've stolen their resources. They've corrupted the governments. They have
but when it comes to that, it's always about the indigenous peoples of those countries having their elected officials or their elite in particular corrupt. And you see,
they've been, but the thing is, a lot of the time they have had no choice. I mean, if you're listening to someone like John Perkins, these guys have had no choice, really, when it's come to, because they would then be buying the elites and a few of the third world countries.
There is no choice up to a certain extent. Let me tell you, I come from Italy, a country that the people say, okay, there is no choice the people have. No, they have a choice. The choice will be to fight like the people fought here in 1776 and to give their own blood for an ideal. That's the solution. You cannot justify yourself and we cannot do anything because we will be, ruined financially, this and that.
But that's the point, because it's the elites that have done that, not
Milei, the Argentinian president, has just announced that for the first time Argentina is actually achieving something. But for the last few months, they've been saying the worst things about him. Of course, people have been instigated to riot on the street and civil unrest and all that. But the actual revolution idea, it's a revolution is about ideas. It's about ideas and about sacrifice. So, of course, you're saying the truth. A lot of these countries maybe didn't have an opportunity. But I have traveled around the world, Chantelle. I have been in not in probably every country in the world, but I have been all over this planet. And I have not been as a tourist. A lot of times I have the privilege to be there working and seeing the inner workings of these countries. And I can tell you that it is about fighting for your rights. And there is some populations that are just too passive, that bow down. I call them in Italian appecorinati, that just bow down and put themselves in a
just
submissive position.
because you can bully someone doesn't mean you should. That's the point. There are indigenous people that won't fight, and they don't want to stand up and fight and kill each other. So there will be a lot more.
But it doesn't work that way. I said to my fellow Italians before I
just
became
because
American,
you can doesn't mean you shouldn't. That's what I'm saying. So just because the powers that be can bully someone and can usurp their resources does not mean they should. You work together with things. And Lizanne, I hear what you're saying, but I understand. I fully disagree that they will escape. I think every person has their own whatever we engage.
Okay, let's make an example. In Africa, all the elite goes to school in Europe, in Switzerland, in America. They all have double passport. The elite is protected, okay? But the elite, if you put them in, I don't know, I make just an example. It might be a silly example. In Congo, rather than Rwanda or whatever other country, they are a minority. They are just a bunch of thousands of people compared to millions. If those millions don't do anything, they are responsible for their own demise. Don't tell me they're not. That's why I became American.
I'm not saying they're not. Everyone has a responsibility.
I couldn't accept anymore being a sheep in Italy, bowing down to the system.
But we have to accept that everyone is different. And it's like, just because a man is stronger than his wife, and he does not mean he should beat her up because she's more submissive than him. That does not, I'm saying, now that's the microcosmic way. And now we're looking at that on the macrocosmic way, which has been going on for way too long. So the thing is, we have to find a way that the world balances again. We're going to find people who are more submissive and countries, and that doesn't mean that they should be bullied. Just because you can doesn't mean you should. So step back and maybe, allow them to teach you something as well about being a little less of a bully boy on the playground.
Unfortunately, from Neanderthal times till now, the only rule that is accepted, that works, is the rule of force. That is, we can be...
But that's because, that's why there's such an imbalance. Don't you think maybe this is time that we got the balance back again?
I know, we can debate it intellectually, but the ultimate result, Chantelle, is like, if I go in a room with you and I have a machine gun, I'm the strongest person. No matter, you can tell me whatever.
But at the end of the day, you are going to pay your comeuppance
for doing
what
that I agree with you.
And I think that's where we're at right now, Leo. I think that's where we're at in the world.
But
that everyone,
being born in Italy in the 70s, in 1970, having seen what went on in the 1970s in Italy with the strategy of tension, Gladio, Operation Gladio, the P2, and all the worst of the worst in Italy as a experimental ground for what will come later on in America with 9/11 and all the rest, I can tell you that for me personally nowadays, and I have a show which is very followed in Italy. I also regularly get guested on national radio in Italy, and I tell them in their face, I feel a sense of shame for having been born in a country of cowards. Okay? That's how it works. A country of cowards that, you're talking about a country that has discovered America. America is called America because of Amerigo Vespucci. Cristoforo Columbus nowadays, the statues are brought down here because the Italian-American community is a bunch of sissies. So, it's about realizing the truth about things. And I think I've realized this truth when I decided to come to America and abandon Europe, because there was no longer a possibility for me to fight. I had great ideas, great expectations. I couldn't find people that were able to sacrifice their lives for an ideal. And so at that point, I had to give up. And I'm sorry. It's not the Italy of 100 years ago that will march on Rome and take power. Regardless of that was wrong or right, Mussolini, what he did. At one point, he was a strong man and just said, okay, we are not taking it anymore. So fascism was wrong, but it demonstrated for a span of time that people can go against the established system of banksters that are taking over the control. So, of course, it was also manipulated. And in the end, of course, it demonstrated to be completely erroneous, especially because of the racial laws and all the rest. So I think that ultimately you have to fight and you have to follow what Thomas Jefferson said in that letter with John Adams. The letter to John Adams is very clear. The tree of liberty must be refreshed from time to time with the blood of patriots. And if you're not able to fight that war because you simply want to have no problem or want to debate it intellectually, it's not going to work out. So I know that ultimately we might have a civil war here in America, but I also have expectations because I know that through that blood of innocence, and it would be a lot of blood, there will be a great new nation coming together. And it's sad that we have to get to that point because of the way we are brought up today in you know, people had it too easy. They don't know. I was brought up by a mother who was bombed regularly in London by the Nazis, who still tell me the story of when she was hiding under the table and the missiles were arriving on London. I was there in the early 80s talking with some relatives from Russia who had to flee when the Bolsheviks arrived, and I saw.
I think that the leaders have betrayed their people. And that, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter which way we look at it.
But it happens over and over. It happens over and over.
Yeah, the leaders have betrayed their people. And unfortunately, as time has gone on, people have become more and more dumbed down because of we can talk about whatever, for however they've done it. And we understand that's how they've done it in many ways. But the way that we really are going to change the world is when we, the people, actually stand up and decide we're not taking the shit anymore. So when we stand up and decide that, then we choose our leaders differently. Then we have leaders who are in their integrity, who don't just want to kill and steal and rape and pillage whoever they can. And yes, that's our history, but that doesn't mean it has to be that way forever. And that's why the world has become so imbalanced. So there's a time for
you have a new player in the game, like I've been saying in the last few years, and that player, unfortunately, is technology advancing to the level of creating our own worst enemy, which will be the AI and the robots.
Well, this is the end result thereof. This is the end result thereof of being dumbed down over decades and decades and decades. And I think now is the time we're moving into a new age, right? We're moving into different times. People are either going to be falling asleep from taking too many jabs and crap like that, so they become the zombies. And there are those of us who are actually standing up, and we can either go right or we can go left. So we can decide what is the world we choose to live in. You can go and live in Joe Biden's world and all of these transhumanists, whatever it is, or you can choose to be in an active environment where we have a balance of everything.
But I think that what happens with the movie Civil War, it demonstrates that at one point we can no longer live together. We have reached a level.
I agree. There's the time where we've got to split up now, where we actually decide which road to take.
Like
we're not
the
just
dialogue seems to not be possible any longer, and that's why you get inevitably to a civil war. So I hope we don't get there, because, like I said,
I agree that I hope that there's enough of us who can find our peace, and there's enough of us who can actually say we don't want to be taking the shit anymore, that we can actually stand up and without too much bloodshed. For a while, I understand there's going to be bloodshed, or there's always maybe hopefully in 1,000 years from now we would have evolved enough to not do that
when I see,
anymore.
for example, when I see all this South America, Central America, and the rest of the world wanting to come to America to achieve a dream, and they are all eager to come here. They don't want to stay in their own countries. Why they don't want to stay in their own countries? And so we need to understand that. That is the main thing here, that there is a bunch of countries that are ruled by a bunch of crooks, and their people let them do it. So why continue with this chitty-chatty we know what is the problem. The problem of those countries when it comes down to Central and South America is obvious. They are all Catholic. It's a fact. It's a fact.
That says a lot.
It's a fact. Jesuits have ruled those countries, and they have purged them. They have purged them of all their goods and taken. You were saying about the colonizers, but here we're talking about the gold that was taken and brought directly into Europe, and the Jesuits were behind it all. And at the same time, we have other countries that are wanting to come here, like the Chinese, and they might come in with hostile intentions, even if they all look nice and dandy, and they will probably open another dry cleaner or do something that we might find very handy. But that is a possibility. And then we have, of course, the Muslim countries. So why all these Muslims who are there want to come to America? Why don't they stay in their own countries? Because their countries are shitholes dominated by a bunch of criminals that need to be exposed once and for all, together with, of course, the religious leaders. So next month, it will be volume 10. It will be the eternal conflict in the Middle East. But for the first time, Leo Zagami will bring you the secret societies that for over 1,000 years, 1,300 years, have controlled these countries and have instigated this and the other religious branch of Islam, and ultimately have waged, between brackets, war on the West, when in reality it's not a war on the West. It's an agreement that was done 1,900 years ago between the Knights Templars and the Muslims. And of course, all this will be presented in a way that I think you will find fascinating. So thank you for having me on, Chantelle, and I think we did.
It's always nice having you on. I enjoy our feisty conversations, Leo.
Yes, and we pray that the civil war will only stay on the screens rather than manifesting in a reality.
I agree.
But ultimately, I think we agreed with most things, apart from probably your ideal, because you have an ideal which seems to be very often that you would like people to be in that way. You would like people to be nicer and people to embrace.
Well, I think we need to evolve. I think as a humanity, as a species, we need to evolve and realize, for hundreds of thousands of years now, all we've done is beat each other up and shoot each other and rape and pillage. You go back to the beginning.
But that is really, I think, ultimately, at the end of times, what we all want. We all want this.
I would love to see species evolve where we don't have to be killing each other and we don't have to have the evil ones controlling us. Because when they do, they literally feed off our blood. And it's literally, war is nothing else other than blood sacrifice. So for me, at the end of the day, when we can end that, that means, and I'm not saying you've got to sit there and be bored in life. Peace doesn't mean that you're bored. Peace means you start doing other stuff that are very constructive. But it's been awesome chatting to you again. I look forward to having you on next week, or not, next week, next month again. With your new book?
Definitely, I would like to spend more money in food for people who can't even eat. And we have many of them around the world that are spending them in useless wars. But the problem here, Bailey, is that the military industrial complex and the big pharma have a unfortunately manifested more and more since 2020 their intentions to take over the show, because they have always been lurking behind the scenes with the banksters from the banking system. Let's remember that this economic system is based on banks, and banks take their money from either the big pharma or the military industrial complex. So this system doesn't come to an end. All the talk that, of course, the ideal talk that you have put forward might not get anywhere without them correcting their whole thing. So
it has to be. It has to be. And we
It has
look
to
forward
be
to
on
that
the
as well. I look forward to that as well.
All the best.
Thank you
care,
so
guys.
much, everybody. Take care, and thank you for joining us. And it's
And
awesome
purchase,
to have you.
of course, my book if you want to have a more in-depth analysis about all the topics that we have touched today. Thank you very much.
Well, next month we're talking about your new book, right? That's going to be
absolutely.
Okay,
My new
look
book.
forward to that.
That is, for those who don't know, my 10th volume, a volume of confessions, volume 10. The title is Islamic Freemasonry and Secret Societies Behind Eternal Conflict in the Middle East.
I love it. I love it. Okay. Awesome. Thank you, guys. God bless you. See you soon.
Take care.
Cherry bye.